curation per se isn't part of our job descriptions. We're often the only ones who are not closely acquainted with what we encounter. We're sort of in a unique position to make recommendations on what we find. Of course, we could just obediently toil away and inventory, rehouse, and vault every duplicate print, trim it out. But we've reached capacity in our cold storage more quickly than we already are. Reality is we really need to consider de-accession as at least an option as soon as the collection comes in. So when I was first thinking about this panel, I went back to look at the listserv just to see what kind of conversations there's been about this, and it seems like we don't talk about it very much. I did find a quote from Jim Linder in 2009, which gets to the heart of things very well. He says, "We simply cannot keep everything. There's no reason to. And furthermore, doing so depreciates the value and ability to find and manage what we should be keeping." So this panel looks to get into the nuts and bolts of this idea a little bit more. Specifically how we might actually honor a collection better through a reduction. That is, retaining fewer items that still sufficiently characterize the work of researchers. And of course, the best and most original evidence for preservation. So we've got three speakers today. First, my coworker at the Academy Film Archive, Stefan Palko. He's our acquisitions coordinator, and he's the first person to greet incoming collections as they come in, and the last to say goodbye to items that we've decided not to retain. And then I'll come back and talk about being in the weeds of a collection and making these kinds of assessments along the way. And finally, Deborah Stoiber from the George Eastman Museum. She's their collection manager. She's going to talk about de-accession policies that they've recently adopted and provide some practical examples of her own. I guess our modest aim with this talk is really just to get more comfortable with having a conversation at all, and be a little more transparent about having to make these hard choices. Specific cases that come up might be controversial, but we should have some time to talk at the end and hear about other situations out there, tough calls that you guys have had to make. But first, here's Stefan.
Thanks, John. Thank all of you for coming. It's nice to see some interest in the subject. I know that when we start talking about de-accessioning, deselecting, junking, trashing, tossing, rejecting, recycling, whatever you want to call it, it's not sort of the side of the process that gets the headline, so to speak. People are much more interested in hearing about what we're finding, protecting, preserving, and sharing. But I can tell you, as someone who has first-hand experience with the sheer volume of material that we're getting at the Academy Film Archive, I regard de-accessioning not just as a very important topic, but really an essential topic. And I hope that you are here today because we're having similar issues in your institutions, and I'd like to hear your stories. I'm sure John and Deborah would have as well. So, I'm Stefan Palko, I'm the acquisitions coordinator at the Academy Film Archive. Should have said that first. I've been to the Academy for about 6 years, the last 4 of which I've been spent coordinating acquisitions. And it's essentially what Sean said. I'm the first person to read material when it comes in, and I'm the last person to kind of send it on its way when it gets to de-accession. Also, another part of that is, you could basically characterize my job as being responsible for the material from the time that it shows up at the archive to the time that it's handed off to an inventory archivist for processing, coordinating it, storing it, basically making heads or tails of it before it gets inventoried. Sometimes that's a matter of minutes, sometimes that's a matter of many years. So I want to talk to you about a few things today. I want to talk about the amount of material that's coming in. I want to talk about where it's coming from. I want to talk about the challenges that come with it and how those challenges essentially necessitate the act of de-accessioning, specifically through what we at the Academy call the tribunal process, which is a meeting that I stage every 3 months, during which myself and two of my coworkers basically gather and make decisions about what to keep and what not to keep. So let's first talk about the amount of material coming in. If I had to point to a specific date that sort of started this modern kind of onslaught tidal wave of acquisitions, I would probably say March 28th of 2012. The reason for that is that was when we first heard from one of the fallen film labs. Okay, this was Crest National that called us. I think around 2004 they changed the name to Crest Digital, but in 2012 they became Crest No More, and they called us and they said, we have 30 pallets of film, and if it isn't cleaned and cleaned very quickly, then we are going to destroy it. So they were located in Anaheim, 40 minutes away. So as an archive that's that close, we bear a certain responsibility to that material. But at the same time, we were sort of pushing our own capacity in terms of our storage vaults. So we couldn't take all 30 pallets. We took 12 of the pallets. UCLA took 18 of the pallets. and nothing ended up getting destroyed by Crest. The next phone call was from Duart. This was roughly a year or so later. Duart, they didn't close, but they did stop processing the film, and they called us as well and said, we have a lot of unclaimed material. We would like to offer it to you. And I know there were some other archives that were involved in this sort of review as well, MoMA, Eastman Museum, right? Anthology, Harvard, a few other places were involved in taking this material, but we actually sent a two-man team out there to do some recon regarding the material. It was our film shop manager, Brian Michelle, and Carter, our documentary curator, went out there to sort of assess the material. And they came back and said, yes, we're going to take a bunch of it, and that bunch ended up being 650 boxes of elements on roughly 19 pallets. That's Ed in the middle, he's right there too. Ed, take about. Ed inventoried this entire collection single-handedly. It yielded about 2 pallets for De-accession, but it was a huge project for quite a long time, and it freed up a lot of storage for me, which I'm always grateful for. And it set the stage for Deluxe. This was last year. Deluxe is the monster. Deluxe remains the monster. This is, they didn't have a lab, they had a plant. Okay, when the plant closed, they called us and we have all sorts of things filmed we would like to offer to you. But Deluxe material was housed in a massive storage facility in Lebec, California, about 80 miles north of Los Angeles. So over the course of many weeks, months really, we just had caravans of people traveling to these stacks, separating out titles, restacking it onto our pallets, wrapping it, basically doing everything except putting it onto trucks and driving it back to Hollywood. So the Deluxe count is currently, I think, 36 pallets and counting. So the LA Times actually wrote a story about it under the headline of reuniting orphan films with their creators. That's just the labs, by the way. That says nothing of the acquisitions that we get on a day-to-day basis from everywhere else. It comes from everywhere. Directors, collectors, studios, animators, production houses, production companies, schools, film festivals, everywhere. Random people in LA and beyond that just find film in their attics and garages are constantly telling us to bring stuff. This is me pulling out a palette of video that was given to us by Rick Baker. Rick Baker, you know, as the legendary makeup and effects artist who did everything from American World in London to Harry and the Hendersons to all the Men in Black films. Baker is a 7-time Academy Award winner. He's an 11-time nominee. So this is someone, me on David Tickup. That's another video. But Baker is someone who, he's kind of a characteristic donor at the Academy, someone who has had tremendous success in the industry. He's based in the LA area. He doesn't just have a relationship with the Academy, but a work relationship with the Academy. And he's someone who, not unlike the film labs, is getting out of the business and divesting himself of his media holdings due to the digital shift. This is what he has to say about it. The CG stuff definitely took away the animatronics part of what I do. It's also starting to take away the makeup part. Business is crazy right now. I like to do things right, and they want it cheap and fast. That is not what I want to do, so I just decided it was basically time to get out. It's sort of an epic statement coming from someone like Rick Baker, someone of that stature. It's also kind of a sad statement, but if there is, you know, a silver lining to it, it's that, you know, he's giving us this video, palette and a half of video that presumably documents, you know, his creative process over the years and any of the makeup tests that he's done over the years. So we at the Academy, we're very happy to get that. So why am I talking about all this? Why am I talking about Rick Baker and all this stuff? Well, we can't quite process, well, there's no way we can process material as quickly as it comes in. So the question is, you know, how do we maintain this material? How do we make heads or tails of this material? Well, we keep it organized. We rely heavily on the inventory process. We stick to our selection criteria, and we de-accession. This is one of our holding malls, Palo North. This is 2,192 square feet. It holds 144 pallets. It's 60 degrees and 40% relative humidity, and it is 2 pallets shy of being at capacity. Across the hall, Pallet Hall South. This is 1,281 square feet. It holds 52 pallets, also climate controlled, and it is currently totally full. These are my archival tools. My workers are using splicers and loops and rewinds. I drive a forklift. It's actually really fun, not kidding at all. And then upstairs in J-Wall, this is the last area where we store uninventory pallets, and this is 4,000 plus square feet. The issue with this room is it's not climate and humidity controlled. It doesn't have rack storaging. but it is big. And the idea for this room is actually not to store pallets in. We want to eventually convert it into another cold vault. But that plan left me as far enough down the road that they've allowed me to put pallets in there that I can't find room for downstairs. So, and there's other pallets elsewhere in the building. We have a cold hallway where all the inventory archivists keep pallets that help with the projects that they're working on. There's a lot of pallets downstairs in the traffic department, 36 pallets at the left are currently in a video vault, just to get them out of the way. At last count, which was roughly 2 weeks ago, there are 312 pallets of uninventoried film video at the Academy of Film Archive. If you think for a second that we're going to inventory and barcode every single thing on every one of those pallets, you are not correct. Which brings me to the start of the inventory, the de-accession process, rather. The Academy employs a crack team of archivists. Many of them are here. I mention them because they're a group of people who are very talented, very experienced, but they're also a group of people who I rely on very heavily because this is a team essentially that's gradually shrinking down these pallets and making them a little more manageable so that I can combine things and condense things and shift things around and make more room for stuff, more room for more material to come in. A coworker once described my job as a giant game of Tetris, which is extremely accurate just in terms of trying to fit things together and move more space. But as they're processing these huge collections, obviously they're coming across material that doesn't meet our selection criteria. For whatever reason, maybe it's damaged or deteriorated, maybe it's incomplete, maybe we already have superior copies, maybe it's material that we just want to collect, like tea, or trimmed it out, whatever it may be. So, as they're finding this material, this brings me to the tribunal process. They're filling out these forms, tribunal submission forms that include the title, the year, the tech code, the gauge, the acquisition number, why they're submitting it for review, whether or not we already have existing material in the collection, and whether or not health site institutions have existing material in the collection. So all this material is gathered, and then I add it to a tribunal chart. This is what I hand out at the meeting that we have every 3 months. Basically just lists everything in a nice organized way. Who attends the meeting? It's our director, our associate director, our collections curator, our film traffic manager, our head of preservation, our collection services coordinator, me, and then usually a couple members of the curatorial staff, depending on what it is that we're looking at that particular meeting. We don't meet in a conference room, we actually meet in front of the material in the tribunal hallway. So the cold and shadowy place will be making these decisions about what to keep and what not to keep. And it's, it can be, I'll admit, it can be a difficult process, it can be a drawn out process, because when you have that many people making these judgments, it can lead to debates, shall we say, disagreements, differences of opinion, which on the one hand can be frustrating, but on the other hand, I think it's very important. It's very important that it's not just one person who's making these calls. So we do it as a team, and even when we do it, all it takes is one person, by the way. If even one person disagrees and says, this is something we should take a second look at, or maybe we should ask the archivist a few questions about this, then that's exactly what we do. We hold off on the de-accession. For the stuff that we do agree upon, even when it's unanimous, our collection services coordinator, Joey Gercio, many of you probably know Joey, he still doesn't allow me to actually remove the material from the building. He's the one he's sort of the liaison to the donors and the depositors. He has to keep in touch with people, keep them updated on the acquisition statuses, et cetera. So he won't let me actually remove the material from the building until he gives me like a final thumbs up. So the system is very it's layered, and I think it works because there's sort of safety nets and checks and balances involved. And that's essentially how we do it. That's more or less all I wanted to talk about today. My point being, I didn't intend to give a talk that was sort of persuasive, try to convince any other archive that they should also be accessioning material. Every archive works differently, but suffice to say, the Academy of Film Archive, de-accessioning is a very necessary part of the process, but we also recognize the necessity of doing so in a very sort of calculated, very diligent, very patient manner. So that is my portion of the one. So I'm going to hand over to Sean. We're going to talk about some specific collections that he has had to curate through the de-accession process. Thank you.
Yeah, so somewhere in the middle of these stages that Stefan discussed, at the Academy, individual archivists are assigned acquisitions or parts of acquisitions so we can more thoroughly identify and catalog them. And one of these that I spent about 2.5 years on was the Saul Bass collection. I'm sure most of you know Saul Bass, graphic designer, famous for corporate logos and movie posters. The filmmaker, best known for title sequences for other directors, Hitchcock, Kremen, director Martin Scorsese, and most widely seen in his own films is surely Why Man Creates from 1968, and won an Oscar that year. So Bass died in 1996, and a couple of years after that, his family donated his personal papers and film holdings to the Academy. And nobody can remember the exact count now, but I think it was about 20 pallets of film material alone. And the most easily identified items were promptly inventoried and vaulted, no problem. But the rest, say 12 to 15 pallets, required closer examination, more research, and these were set aside. More than a decade later, partly due to the backlog that you saw on the screen there, I finally got started on it. Just prior to that, we had a meeting with my supervisors, curators, collection management people, preservationists, just to generally talk about what kinds of things we thought we would want to retain from his collection. You can't really anticipate what you're going to find, so I was given considerable discretion. Informed and finished elements for sure, but probably not trims and outs. But what about an Academy Award winner like Why Man Creates? We had just restored the film, and a couple people felt very strongly that we should keep all the Echtachrome camera original. So we did, but it's not necessarily the case with all of Bass's television commercials or some of the lesser-known short films. But all sorts of interesting things turned up. Sequences that were developed but unused for whatever reason, including a completely different opening and closing to Why Man Creates that was rejected by the film's sponsor. So if you've seen the movie, it's comprised of vignettes, it's got many moods and tones, but the first version was even sillier, as evidenced by this guy. He's got a little animated mouth, and I can't remember what it says. So the test I sort of put this stuff as I was going through it was just asking, this item at hand, does it have any research or preservation value? Alternate versions certainly give insight into Bass's creative process. For The Searching Eye, which is one of 2 short films that Bass made for the 1964 World's Fair, I found 4 pretty much complete but notably distinct versions. And while his title sequences were for hire jobs, ultimately delivered to the studios, he often made and kept preferred alternate versions to show in his personal appearances. So of course we want to keep all these versions. But how much insight can we glean from camera tests, optical elements, stock footage? Stock footage not even shot by his company, but merely licensed from another stock footage house. And there was a ton of this stuff. Is the range of stock choices made available to Bass but not used, as revealing his favorite shots that he used again and again. So here's one from the top. This is from the deleted original ending Phase 4, which is Bass's one film as a feature director. And then this swooping hawk turns up again almost 2 decades later in his title sequence for Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear. And I think this wildlife footage probably originated with a series of Rainier beer ads that Bass made in the mid-60s. So the best insight into how Bass used stock footage, if someone wanted to study such a thing, would be looking at the work itself, more so than an unwieldy library of unused material. So most of the stuff, which was faded print, original negative, we redirected to a Los Angeles stock footage house so it could live on in that capacity, provided it was generic enough to be disassociated from its original context. And again, just to be clear, this is not about getting rid of material to make things easier on us. In fact, the unidentified material in the collection is what I spent the most time on. And I did encounter a sub-library of stock material that was definitely shot by Bass's team that I found intriguing enough to keep. So there were a ton of boxes marked NY film, as in New York City, and I have no idea what project this was intended for. Again, some of the shots were later incorporated into other projects, but something about the specificity and the organization of the material led me to believe it was something more than an in-house stock library. I'm imagining a City Symphony kind of film, we don't know. But some of it's really beautiful, and the hope is that a researcher will bring in new information and be better able to contextualize it for us. And I'll admit to some subjectivity at play here. I mean, personally, I'm more intrigued by material related to a possibly unrealized project, more so than outtakes to a known film. For example, the Solar film from 1980. I probably wouldn't recommend keeping multiple takes of a woman hanging laundry on the line to dry. In the film, this is to illustrate one of the many things that the sun does for us. But when Bass himself steps into the frame to show us how it's done, that's immediately a more compelling fragment. I mean, no offense to this actress, but we don't need 6 takes of her doing this little bit of business. So this whole thing is a balance of expediting inventory, yet also doing right by the material. Of course, I got better acquainted with Bass's career as I went along. We're talking 50 years of work that was coming to me one pallet at a time. So I had to go back and reevaluate some of the same material again with new information. And when the film recycling truck finally came to take some of this stuff away, I reopened every box again just to make sure I was confident that it was either redundant or non-essential. So to move on from Bass, and I'll just add that we consulted with the Bass family on all of this stuff. Trims and outs and unused tapes need to be taken on a case-by-case basis. So a couple years ago, we received about a pallet and a half, I think, production material related to a very minor romantic comedy from the early 2000s. I guarantee most of you would probably not have heard of it. But the filmmaker didn't want it. He, in fact, signed over the rights to us and everything, which is very rare, and said we could do with it as we saw fit. Well, we kept the cut negative and other finalized conformed elements, but none of the outtakes. I mean, we're not talking Nora Ephron, Tom Hanks, and Meg Ryan here. If so, maybe we would have come to a different determination, maybe not. But there's really no cultural impact in sight of this particular film, and I know this is a dicey business since every frame of Laurel and Hardy is precious today, and that wasn't always the case. And I think that could be a whole other very interesting panel, creating or reinforcing an artistic canon through collection choices. But given our limitations of time and space in particular, we've got no choice but to just hammer through and make these tough calls as we go along. So some other dilemmas that I thought were interesting. We have almost the entirety of the Maisels Films holdings on deposit from, the major films, Gimme Shelter, Grey Garden, Salesman. In the case of a deposit, particularly with documentaries, we're more inclined to keep outtakes. In the event the rights holder wants to tap into them again and do some sort of expanded version of a project, or if a researcher wants to dig deeper on a particular subject, these films are certainly rich with unseen material. So if you don't know Christo, he's an installation artist who's been transforming landscapes all over the world for 50 years now. And the Maisels brothers were the documentarians for many of these projects. So on umbrellas, which occurred in 1991, Christo installed thousands of umbrellas in rural California and Japan simultaneously. And an early longer cut of the film showed at the 1994 Berlin Film Festival. So of all the production material that arrived, there were about 75 reels of mixing elements to this first version. And so I'm looking at this stuff, it's like a third of a pallet, you can picture that, and I just did not have the heart to vault it. And the reason I say that is we've got the final mix and a print master element, got an optical track, an internegative, we can reproduce this first version. But no one's ever going to go back and remix this early festival version. Pretty confident of that. So putting this stuff away, nice cans, taking up that real estate in the vault, it just seemed like an empty gesture of no practical value. And fortunately, Basil's brothers agreed. Basil's company, I should say. But we kept almost everything else in the film. Sync dailies, camera original, other production elements. One exception that I kind of went back and forth on for a while. There were about 20 or so VHS and pneumatic videotapes that were off-air recordings of Christo-related television news coverage. So of course, in anticipation of the installation, there's going to be a certain degree of coverage. And then there were a couple of tragedies that occurred. A woman in California was killed during a windstorm, and in Japan, a worker was electrocuted when they were dismantling the project. And so the way this news material was incorporated into the film was in a very highly stylized rephotographing of the television screen. And this rendering seemed the one to privilege over the original newscasts. Our current policy is we don't want to vault any videotape. We can't commit to managing the files forever, digitizing them, promptly, and then banishing files. And these original newscasts, they just seemed out of the scope of our responsibility to the work. Here's a Christo fun fact for you. But again, the fundamental content of the news stories is contained in the 16mm negative and sync dailies. This reflects how the raw material is filtered by the filmmakers. As for the original newscasts, I know the Vanderbilt archive has some, but as for the copies we received, we wasted them. Okay, so one last case study that required its own unique approach, the 1963 film Robert Frost and Lovers Before the World. Won Best Documentary Oscar that year, and cut negative is apparently lost. So the Academy, in collaboration with the UCLA Film and Television Archive, preserved the film from the only known 35mm print. It was originally produced by WGH in Boston, and Dartmouth College had, I think, three pallets of production material, which they donated to us. And we were hoping to find a cut negative in there, but it was not. One of the interesting things about the film is that Shirley Clark is a credited director, but apparently she did not get along with Robert Frost and left mid-production. So this is her standing with her back to the camera, and Robert Frost is seated in the center. And you can just tell in the early 60s, the look on these old guys' faces, they just do not want to be directed by a beatnik woman. So maybe it wasn't a great fit, I don't know. So it seems like this was probably a for-hire job for her, and there's not a lot in the material to illuminate her specifically as an artist. I did find a fleeting glimpse of her on location. So this is in a Vermont bookstore in the town where Frost lived. And it appears someone just turned the camera on her for a couple seconds, and she's holding the Grove Press edition of The Connection, which is the film that she adapted, or the play that she had adapted into a film the year before. So that's kind of a fun fragment to have. But I was hoping there would be something more for Project Shirley, which is Milestone's ongoing effort to restore her work, but there really wasn't much. But thanks to Dennis Doros for recognizing the book jacket image, because I went down. But fortunately, there's another major cultural figure at the center of this film, Robert Frost, the poet. And we've got 10 hours of material that show him talking, often with his contemporaries, again, 10 times more than the hour-long film. So the original production sound was presumably on quarter-inch tape, which too is lost. So the only surviving track is the full coat mag dailies and work track in very poor condition. So I had to contend with hundreds of rusty cans, tiny rolls and other trims, picture and sound wound together. We all know what this looks like. And I organized it the best I could and compiled the sound only onto larger rolls for transfer. Due to the condition, sort of a dual system flatbed review of this stuff is just no longer feasible. I spent an insane number of hours compiling the mag track, and to try to do the same with picture dailies and keep synchronization would not only be a nightmare, but just wasted effort. So somewhere along the way I had the realization, well, we don't need the print dailies at all. What I did instead is I recorded the negative key numbers and the editorial coding, so the sound could later be cross-referenced back to the negative outtakes, which we are keeping. By removing the print dailies entirely from the equation, it makes the collection stronger with fewer items. We're not losing any content, and it's actually easier to navigate for a researcher. And the captured audio files are now the entry point to research. And again, if someone wants to find a corresponding picture, we can do that. We've got an intern coming in the spring who's going to listen to all this stuff, create a more thorough rundown of the content. So just for fun, here's a little snippet from the audio. This is Frost being at a slippery interview subject with the second director of the film, Robert Hughes. And this is after, I think, Frost had declined 3 times to recite the title poem to the camera.
The possible title of the movie. It might be Robert Frost Having a Say.
Oh, that was my first joke about that when they wanted to make this, what do you want to do? Make an Nanook of the North out of me, Oh, I don't know what to call it.
So we got 10, 12 hours of that, if anyone wants to come So I hope you can see that this isn't about shirking responsibility. In fact, some of these approaches actually make things more difficult for ourselves. It's really whatever the material itself dictates. So all the stuff I talked about, I'm going to guess about 10 pallets of material we didn't keep on it, and I don't think anyone's going to miss it. Of course, if I ever hear about it, it'll probably be today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ed Stoiber from the George Eastman Museum. Thanks.
My name is Deborah Stoiber. I'm the collection manager at the George Eastman Museum. For those of you who are not aware, George Eastman House did officially change its name on October 6th. They're now the George Eastman Museum. If you have any email addresses of anybody from the George Eastman House, they all changed. So I have my business card up here, and you can use this as a model for any any emails you have for anybody at my institution. And first off, another thing is, after listening and working with Sean and Stefan on this presentation, was that I'm never complaining about my backlog ever again. Compared to what these guys have to face, mine is pretty small. But my job is basically a combination of what these two do. I'm the person who sees it come in. I'm also the last person to see if it is to leave the museum permanently. So what I want to talk about today a little bit is sort of just kind of wrapping up what they talked about, and also what we do at the museum, giving you a little bit more of the logistics behind how we de-accession. If you don't have a de-accession policy where you're at, or if you're curious to know how to go about writing one, let me know. I'll be happy to send you copies of what we have, and you can use it as a model if you're curious to know more about it. But there is a balancing act if you are de-accessioning, which Sean and Stefan are trying very hard to, we're doing a very good job explaining this to everybody in the room, is that there's definitely certain areas you need to consider. And one is the federal and state laws of where you're at. You want to make sure that you are meeting those federal and state laws, especially when you're working with donations that have been given a tax write-off. If somebody has donated material to your institution and they've taken a big fat tax write-off on it, you need to make sure you are not doing anything to this material before the set amount of time set by federal law, that is 3 years. Mission, statement, and ethics, your institution's practices and accountability. Know what's, how you go about deselecting materials. What is the process? Do you talk to your curator first? Do you have monthly meetings or 3-month meetings with your staff? At the Eastman Museum, I am going to say Eastman House at least once in this presentation. At the Eastman Museum, I write a written proposal to my senior curator, and then forwards it to the director after they've discussed it. It goes into a 3-month waiting period with our registrar's office, after which it may be proposed to the Board of Trustees for final voting. So de-accession can take anywhere from 6 months to 3 years at our institution. So you definitely meet your museum standards. If you are a member of any other affiliates, such as the American Alliance of Museums, there are set standards for de-accessioning to meet their standards. You definitely want to check out their website. It's aam.org. And look up de-accessioning if you want to see what is some of the set standards at other museums nationwide. So yes, I'm very wordy. I don't have pretty pictures. I have lots of words, and I'm one of those girls who reads her slides. Instances of de-accession. I'm not going to read all of these, but I am going to just point out a few of things to just highlight on this list. And one of it is the object has failed to retain its identity. And what I'm talking about this is when an object is so badly decomposed. So for example, with nitrate, if it is decomposed to the point where it no longer resembles what it originally was, it's turned into powder, it's turned into that cotton bud. It's turned into something that is no longer viable for preservation, conservation, or access. The item is redundant. Another one where you end up with a palette full of ASP tapes and they're all exactly the same program, exact copy, just have 200 copies of the same program. Other items to notice is if the item is being returned to its donor, the donor errors in science to fulfill donor restrictions related to the item, which the museum is no longer able to meet. So, for example, if something has been given to the museum and the owner wants it back for some strange reason, they decided they don't change, basically they change their mind. We've had cases where people have donated their home movies to the museum, and then their relatives found out, and they got upset, and they decided they wanted the home movies, and in that case, the home movies were actually returned to the donor rather than having a huge family argument for the The object isn't presented a hazard to people or other collection items. It's also a really relevant item for de-accessioning. We had a gentleman who donated a palette of film out of Chicago, and he said, it's in really good shape, don't worry, you want it, you really want it. So it arrived and it was completely covered in black mold and spider webs. And so it actually was very hazardous to work with, especially when I have students and interns with asthma, or myself, where I just thought it was disgusting. When I started to actually go through and put on the whole suit, the whole gear, and I found it was like 6 copies of Real One of Valley Girl. Just Real One of Valley Girl, and they were all scratched up and faded and beat up. So it's this kind of thing. So it was clearly objects that were a hazard for people actually. So writing and update your de-accession policies. So what are your policies? When were they last updated? When I was up here a year ago talking about de-accessioning, at that time our policies was to maintain the material for a minimum of 7 years. Earlier this year we changed it to 4. So we're still maintaining within federal and state guidelines. And I hate to tell you guys this, but I've been really working on my backlog. And I've gotten to the point where now I'm working on material that was donated in 2010, up to 2010. I'm really proud of this. So I've gotten to the point where it's past the 7 years, but we still want to keep going. I don't want to sit and wait a few more years and then go back to it. So it's a way to help kind of move it along to get rid of the big moldy palette of film. We need to push that through earlier than 7 years. And in the case you contact the donor and you contact the owner and you say, hey, you said this was in great shape. He's like, well, yeah, hope you like it. I'm like, okay. So, thanks, buddy. The George Eastman House, this was written and submitted before we changed our name. So it's George Eastman Museum policy. I forgot to change that. Our policy gives step-by-step instructions, again, on how to de-accession. So it's completely transparent to the trustees, to the other staff, to the registrar's office, and to the donor. So everything must be in writing and approved. Everything must be signed off and voted upon by the Board of Trustees. And even then, the item after being voted on by the trustees must be held on to for another 3 months, just in case there's any questions or somebody wants to change their mind. Yeah. There's been a few cases where there's been lots of questions on de-accessioning in our museum, but as the trustees understand the purpose behind what we're trying to accomplish, and as I get more comfortable with going through collections and making decisions, it's been coming together much more. So hence, before you begin de-accessioning, review your donor agreement, as I mentioned earlier. Even if you think all of your donor agreements are exactly the same, you know, they have that standard form, you just want to go and double check to make sure somebody didn't add an amendment to it saying, oh, but yes, if you change your mind, send it back to me or send it to another archive. Especially when you're dealing with materials that have been bequeathed to you in an estate. We have a case of books where they were given to us with the understanding that any books we did not want would go to another museum in Pittsburgh. So we're in the process of selecting the books we want from this collection of chemistry books, and the rest are going to the next place listed in the agreement. Make sure you have a complete and accurate inventory, and document. Make it as transparent as possible so that if anybody does ask questions, you know exactly which item you're talking about. And you have 20 films called in the review, and you want to make sure you're talking about which particular. If you have any hesitation, again, leave it alone. If there's anything in the back of your mind that's just saying, I'm just not ready to do it, just leave it. Just leave it for now and come back to it later. Always take your time, don't rush, because if you rush, that's when you make mistakes. And always have a plan in place before you remove the collection. This is especially important if you are looking to find a new home for it. And quite often in the cases when we are de-accessioning, it's because we have multiple copies. We don't have space for all of them, so quite often we try to find another home for another archive. And I've called on many other institutions to take pallets of material that we had. We just didn't need 6 copies of this educational tile or 5 copies of this. It's to the point where I think some people are believing. So the case study I'm going to talk about is the film and wombat donation. This is just 4 pallets, which makes your stuff sound so. 4 to me sounds like a lot, but then I hear stuff. Most of this is a mixture of paperwork, video, all kinds of formats of film and video. It is a television program. We actually do not collect television at the museum. But some of it has vinegar syndrome, and unfortunately where it had been stored before, it had been stored where there was standing water. So we also have a lot of cases of what we videotape and what we film. The collection contains a lot of VHS and ASTP tapes of 30-second clips of licensed material from other archives and studios. There's lots of 30 seconds of different Academy Award presentations from these movie stars, and a lot of them say they came from the Academy. So I know they've got that. So again, this donor took a tax write-off, which was finally signed in 2010. And the donor is also the copyright owner. So the first thing we did is we did ask the donor, we said, we just simply can't keep all of this material. Do you want any of it back? And they said, oh, we don't want to keep it. So then we actually looked at trying different archives to see if anybody else wanted to share in this donation. And after 3 official rejections, we decided to move to the next phase, which is to deselect material that we didn't feel was necessary to keep at this time, but still maintain the integrity of each program. So what we decided to keep was the unpreserved material, the unique pieces. There's quite a few cassette tapes of interviews with different movie stars and their families, in which all of them have been written and transcribed. So those are unpreserved and very interesting. Were not used in the final products, so we do want to definitely keep those. Obviously, we want to keep the original negatives, including the sound. And part of what we're going to suggest at De-accession, which will happen in 2016, is the outtakes and trims. Most of these are just bits and pieces. The programs were released on PBS, A&E, and Lifetime Television, and a lot of it is clips actually of PBS, A&E, and Lifetime Television, clips of their logos. Stock footage from licensing houses and archives, which we no longer have the rights to, and also double checking with the archives to make sure they still have the material. Most of this is on VHS tape and is in very poor condition. Most of those are the ones that have a mold on them. And obsolete video when the same show is on a newer format. So we'll keep the ones which we can still show and check and look at, but the older formats, generally the ones that have fallen apart more. And we'll probably end up getting those as well, approved by the trustees in April. So again, make an inventory, make a document. Here's some titles. You have the base, you have the objects as it came in. Yes, there's a lot of unidentified. What box number it came in, and how many objects in that count, and then some notes. So you see some of them are at toss, because I've already checked them. We're going to toss those, and then keep 1 copy or keep 2 copies. We have transcripts and the stills, we don't need to transcribe it. And now what? So again, we can keep trying to find a home for the unwanted materials. If anybody's interested, let me know. We're also going to find a proper disposal recycling company because we are in Rochester, New York. We do have a good relationship with Kodak, and they do actually recycle all of the film material, although I cannot find anybody who recycles the video. If anybody knows a place Western New York that recycles the videotapes, please let me know. And then, of course, conserve those cabinets. And if you have any questions, there's all our email addresses at this time. I think we will take questions. Does anybody have any questions? Wonderful topic of the accession. Topic nobody wants to talk about, but we... Oh, I have a question.
So for Stefan, for the material that came from the process, what's your process in order to notify the rifle before we get to any questions like this?
The person you're sitting next to right now, Ed, he's handled most of the acquisitions from the labs, and there is a process of, as we find this material, of making a real effort to contact the filmmakers. And then they have the option of, we tell them we found the reels, and then we ask, would you like to make a deposit of the material at the Academy Film Archive? I feel like most people say yes, and then it's a matter of creating an acquisition record for that particular person in the database saying that this particular reel was found in this acquisition, and then they officially have a deposit of the Academy Film Archive. It also leads to sort of kind of a snowball effect, because when you call these people, a lot of times, sometimes they will say like, oh, by the way, I've got a bunch of reels under my bed, my wife's gonna kill me if I don't get rid of that. Do you want that as well? And then we'll get more reels coming our way. So we do make an effort to reach out to them and make sure that they're going through the stacks.
We all talk about this potentially happening, but have you ever de-accessioned something and then heard from someone looking for a particular asset that you de-accessioned?
I have not.
I haven't, but I did have one collection when you're dealing with abandoned property. It's a completely different ballgame and different sort of logistics and laws you have to go through. And there was one collection where I sent certified letter after certified letter, and they just went to the dead letter pile, and I couldn't figure it out. So we actually were in front of the trustees, and I explained the whole situation, and I said, I can't find this woman. She used to live in Rochester. I don't know if she's passed away or if she moved to Florida. And one woman said, oh, I knew her husband. He died, and she cashed in the life insurance and did a round-the-world cruise. She's been gone for 2 years, and that's why I haven't been able to find her, but I'll get her address. So it actually happened at a trustee meeting where I had a small collection of 16 millimeters. She had like Betty Boop Castle films or something, and we already have like 20 copies of each. And so in that case, it was like, oh, well, I'm glad somebody knew how to find this woman, and I kind of felt like, oh, okay. And we were able to get a hold of her, and she actually said, no, she didn't want them back, but, and then signed off so that we could actually give them away to another archive, actually. So that's happened to me more, actually with abandoned property. As soon as I give up trying to find the person, that's when they come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, I just had a question. If they donate the collection and they get a tax write-off and then you give it back to them?
You can't.
You can't? Oh, okay, because I was wondering about that, because I've seen that in some donation forms where it says, if we decide not to keep it, we'll give it back to you, but I thought that didn't make sense because they've already gotten the tax deduction.
Yeah. So in this case with the gentleman, we took a tax write-off and we said, you want it back, but you'll have to pay whatever you, and he said no, and he actually didn't really want it back. He was hoping we would digitize everything for him and give him copies of his copies. And was kind of hoping we would do that instead. And we said, no, we can't do that. But in that case, no, he just said, whatever you want to do is fine with him. So we're keeping the integrity of the entire Wombat collection that he donated, but yeah, unfortunately in that case, we can't give it back unless he refunded all his taxes.
Sean, the Warner Brothers Go logo from the early 70s, do you have any materials on any preservation quality materials on that? And the question behind the question is, in 2012, Warner Brothers had to redo that logo because it was being looked at put ahead of a movie and they couldn't find a quality element. So Pat Tiger literally redid the logo like from scratch, matching the move that Saul Bassett made. I'm curious if you have anything about anything to throw away.
Oh, God, I wonder if I did encounter that, because he did do a film for their shareholders around that time. I don't know if you've heard of a film called Notes on the Popular Arts, but it started as a film that Warner Communications licensed to him. And so we do have certain elements of that, but yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if by accident there wasn't reprint of that stuff, in other collections. I was surprised if they had recreated
Oh,
it.
there was nothing good.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Aside from the legal responsibilities for the tax credit for de-accession, you also have the hurt feelings of donors. So at one point, your institution was very interested in getting its material. Then you're making a phone call and saying, by the way, we want to get rid of it or give it back. Do you have any advice about those calls?
Well, no, I think part of that discussion happens when you're having your initial discussions with the donor. It's like, well, we'll see, we'll see how this stuff actually suits our collection. So I imagine you try to prime them for that a little bit, that contingency. But go ahead.
We have an unconditional donation agreement, which states very clearly in there that if we decide not to keep it, we have the right to dispose of it or to find another collecting institution as we can. In the cases of some of our mass de-accession we have found in terms of one major filmmakers, he knew we weren't going to keep everything. He just wanted to send us everything he could find on his films and told us to select the best copies. And he knew we were not going to keep 25 copies of this particular title. He says, do whatever you have to do. I don't care. You pick the best. I can't figure out what's good and what's bad. So that's been one of the big cases. But quite often when we get that unconditional gift donation, which we tell them up front before it is accepted, they're very aware of it, that they're not going to keep it. Now we've really changed our policies at the museum where we don't just say, send it all to us and we'll sort through it later, because we simply don't have the space or the staff. And I've been actually traveling a lot more in the past 2 years to go to filmmakers' homes and to do the selecting there, and then help them dispose of whatever it is we don't.
I just wanted to give a name to something that I think you talked about but didn't name. In our de-accession policy, we have what we call a cooling off period. It's a 3-month period. It might not suit you, but I felt like what you were talking about, the process you had with Joe, in a way was your kind of cooling off period. And I think it's intrinsically built into what you do too. And I think that is important, that there's a breadth of time between the decision to get rid of it and the actual process to get rid of it. In our case, that's generally bogged down in bureaucracy. But the other thing I wanted to ask though was the Christo TV stuff. I get your reasoning, but if I was a researcher into Christo, I would find that those television research. What effort did you go to ensure that they were preserved somewhere else?
Well, yeah, like I said, I did a little research and found that the Vanderbilt archive had some, but as far as, Nightline and stuff like that, I mean, it's really only their online resources that I was able to, explore that a little bit. I don't know, it's weird, it's like, are we the archive for Basils, or are we the archive for Christo? Do we keep all things Christo? And it's just like, it's kind of a gray area there. And I think a lot of these tapes were recorded off air. They were in subpar visual condition, which may have been one of the reasons why they re-photographed. It's like, this looks bad, let's, just go all out and really try to make it look grotesque. And maybe that's to play up the media sensationalism, I don't know. But these just didn't seem like master copies that...
No, I guess it's the value of the community, isn't it? Speaking as an Antipodean, we know that a lot of material that was filmed about Australia was filmed by other people and went away. So, we would like to think on all reasonable occasions, people before they de-accession something like that would think, gee, maybe I'll give them a call.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean,
pretty time consuming.
Yeah, chase down everybody. It's like the call of ABC. It's like, oh, you have this Nightline from, August 20th, 1991.
What if I don't?
Yeah, well, who's going to do that work? Again, it's, like I said, we got to expedite inventory. We have to move forward, make the best calls we can at the time, and live with them, so, yeah. Like I said, that was one I struggled with, and I got different opinions from people that colleagues that I work with, but
and that's a key to it too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Opening up the conversation as wide as you practically can,
right,
to ensure you can as the greatest opinion before you make the decision.
Yeah.
And some decisions are pretty easy to make. You have 6 copies of Gone with the Wind. You have the original camera negatives, and Warner Brothers has borrowed it twice now to scan it first at 4K and then at 8K. And then you have 2 of your 6 prints are incomplete, faded to red, vinegar syndrome. Those should be easy decisions, but it still took me a year to get it all the way through, writing the letters, submitting it up, getting it to the trustees, doing the cooling off period, and getting it to the recycling company. So some things you think would be pretty easy, but sometimes you just have to have patience and know that you're not going to lose sleep over making that decision. But there's other cases where you just have to put it aside and think about it, have the lots of discussions.
Having participated in some of our tribunals, it's very hard for us to get rid of something because there's 12 people in that room, and there almost always is going to be somebody who's going to object to getting rid of it. There's one, I won't mention the person's name, one person in staff who never wants to get rid of anything. We're going to have to satisfy him. That's always not such an easy task.
And that's good with you guys is you're all professional archivists and you know what you're discussing. Sometimes we have a group of trustees and they don't understand really what you're talking about. It takes a lot longer, I think, in some ways, and they're facing different challenges of trying to explain it because they don't always understand. But you just keep working at it very slowly so you don't make mistakes and educate them.
Anything else? expertise in the room.
Okay, so you've got the 60 millimeter documentary film, you've got the optical track negative, you have the quarter-inch or net final extract, and then you've got all the extracts. Where do you keep all those things?
Be more cautious about the file.
Use the mic. You can hear in the back.
The question is about mixing elements or sort of beneficial for everything. And we do tend to keep that stuff just in the event when to mix it for another language or, you know, just have those stems. But yeah, in case of this
So you
festival.
have to have the diagram for how the final sound is made. So you got like,
Hopefully we would have some paperwork on it,
so
but
you can go back and remix the track.
sure, yeah. We probably wouldn't even remixing the tracks.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And along those lines, would you ever, if you have trims and outs of, you have a positive footprint and negative of the same thing would be negative, would you ever throw away the positive prints knowing that if you did need to get there, you would have a negative, which would be the higher quality anyway? Is it ever like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I tried to explain with the Robert Frost outfits. Yeah, so that it is, the picture dailies, just, there was no use, they were redundant, I think. Yeah.
That was also a really good example where you got what at the end of the day was probably the most important element accessible, which is the sound. And you can leverage the client's desire to have an image if they want it as a way of alleviate some of the costs of your archive having to produce those. I thought that was a really good decision to keep the neg and get rid of that and make the sound accessible.
Yeah, and part of the reasoning was that, you know, it's very static material. If you've got, you know, Robert Frost, seen it with a couple other guys talking, we know what that looks like. It's what they're saying, the content of what they're saying that's most vital. So if someone wants to license something for another work, then yeah, we could resync it negative. Yes.
I just thought of one question. When you de-accession the materials, do you also de-accession any record of the fact that they were there? Or do you keep a record of the fact that that existed and it was de-accessioned?
We
keep the record.
We keep a meticulous record of that information. Every access trustee, yeah, we definitely log all of that.
We keep it all in TMS, the museum system, our card catalog system. We put in there the object, when it was de-accession, why it was de-accession, who approved it, and on what date, the trustee who finalized it. Yeah, we keep all of that before we approve it.
Okay, I think we're pretty much at 3 o'clock.